case that in there that wasn't a mob case, but it was a case that made international news. There was a dentist in Brooklyn who was a dental surgeon.
Yeah.
Michael Mastromarino, who was
I know his wife, ex-wife, Barbara.
Yeah.
Very well.
Okay. Well, I got to tell you a little story about Barbara in a second. So that case, as you know, he was stealing body parts from cadavers because he had lost his dental license.
Yep.
He was a drug addicted. He had become addicted to Demerol. He lost his license. Was living a high life and needed money to continue living that way. And he started this what I call body snatching. It wasn't really body snatching, but what he did is he made deals with funeral directors, and they tipped them off to dead bodies, and he went with his crew, and they took bone and tissue and all kinds of stuff. So,
and real quick for everybody watching, I'm super familiar with that case. So imagine you go to visit, a loved one, go to say your buys, go to say respects, especially Italian Americans were like, would take me instead, and like the legging is a PVC pipe, not bone, not like skin. They would just take whatever, and there is an appropriate vehicle to donate, your organs or donate your skin or donate your bone. But one, you have to opt in, and then number two, they need to test it. Our man Mastromarino, whatever his name was, something like that, he just kind of neglected to do that. But anyway, keep going.
Mastromarino was his name.
Mastromarino, correct.
Yeah, and he was taking bone from anybody and everybody, and it didn't make a difference if they had died of communicable diseases,
correct,
or if they were 90 years old. And the way that the thing kind of broke open and hit the press was Alistair Cook, who was a Masterpiece Theater master of ceremonies. His daughter. We found out through our search of the records that Alistair Cook was one of the bodies that he ravaged.
Really?
And, and when we went to his daughter to talk about it, to see if she had given permission for them to do this, she was horrified by it. And when we told her what was going on, she said, "You know something? When I had my father cremated, and when we spread his ashes, I was expecting little bits of bone and things of that nature. It was like talcum powder. And the reason for that was because there was no bone. They had taken all of the bones." But Tom, this is a guy who was in his 90s. Could you imagine getting a bone transplant of a guy who's in his 90s? But Mastromarino did it, and he made a lot of money.
I always wondered about, and I'm going to be that guy for a second. You know what I mean? I heard the name. I followed up on his case. I know Barbara pretty well. I knew her pretty well. She was on Oprah and everything too. We'll get to that in a second.
Oh yeah.
He mobbed up. I always kind of felt there might have been, not that the mob was involved with this caper, but I always kind of felt he had OC ties.
Well, the only OC ties that I know about is that he bought, the way that we got the case is that a funeral company, if you want to call it that, they ran funeral homes in different parts of the country, bought a funeral home in Bensonhurst, Brooklyn.
Okay.
And the guy that owned who they bought it from, was rumors that he had mob ties. And the reason they thought that is that he had been selling prepaid funerals. So he had been building up a big war chest, $300,000 worth of these funerals.
Yeah.
When these new people bought the place and got the books and looked at his bank records and everything, none of that money was around any longer. And the theory was that he had mob ties and he owed money to the mob, and that's correct. And you know what happens to him, Tom? You're not going to believe this.
Oh, no.
While the case was pending and after he had been arrested, because he was a guy who I don't think anybody really trusted, who was a bad guy, thinking in terms of whether or not he would talk. He was up on a roof doing some work in his house, and he allegedly fell off the roof and really hurt himself. And so, I'll leave it to you. Did he have mob ties or not? But we never were able to prove that. And you know what? For our purposes, it didn't make a difference.
And it gets bet. I don't want to wish anything bad on anybody, but I'll say it's apropos. You know how Michael died, right? How the dentist died.
I certainly do. Absolutely.
You can say, guys, this is why you don't do crime.
Yep.
Tell him
Yep.
how he died. It's so apropos, respectfully.
He was stealing bones. He died of bone cancer.
Yep. Yep.
So let me tell you the little story about Barbara. I was asked to go to do a TV show.
Yeah.
Something like, I didn't know who I married, or I married a
married a mobster, or
yeah,
a monster or something.
Yeah, something of that nature.
Yeah.
So I had to go to the studio in Lower Manhattan. It was in the back of a building. I go into the back and I walk in, and there's a woman sitting there in what was supposed to be the green room, the waiting room for.
Yeah.
So I look at her, and I didn't recognize her. And she looked at me and she says, "You're Mike Vecchione, aren't you?" I said, "Yeah, why?" She said, "I'm Barbara Mastro." She had changed her name to Mastromarino. I said, I'm Michael's